And I want you to join me in choosing to challenge gender stereotypes and bias. But before we do that, I'm going to put all of you into a time machine, and we're going to very quickly, for about 40 seconds, travel back into the 1950s to rural Kansas, a farming community in the middle of America. And I want you to pay particular attention to an adorable little girl. You know who I'm talking about. I hope you'll be able to see, and I hope this works.
I would crawl through Kansas on my hands and my knees just to find out where did I come
Now, that little girl is my mother, Chris. And I know what you're thinking. It's Women's Day. Shombi wants all of us to know how much he loves his mother. And while I do love her very much, and she will be watching this, I'm sure, later, that's not the point. In fact, I'm not bringing flowers up onto the stage. Nothing wrong with flowers. But my point is actually the opposite of being sentimental on Women's Day. Rather, it's speaking about a very simple, but I think powerful lesson from my mother's upbringing. She grew up on this farm, iconic Kansas farm in the 1950s. She was the youngest, the third born of three sisters in the family to my grandparents, Grace and Albion Avery. So on the Avery farm, actually, they had first two girls, my aunts, Joni and Cherry. But, you know, of course, in the 50s, especially in a farm, you need a boy, right? You got to have a boy on a farm for things to work. And third time's the charm. So my grandparents thought, let's try again. Only this time, the third time was a charming little girl, my mother, Chris. So on the Avery farm, there was no time for luxuries such as gender stereotypes, boys' roles, girls' roles. There was just a heck of a lot of work to be done and three girls to do it. That was it. So from a very early age, my mother and her sisters, they learned how to get dirty. They learned how to get strong. They learned how to do every single job on that farm. Whether it was driving tractors, driving big trucks, sowing, harvesting, using big machete knives to cut down weeds the size of small trees, picking up really, really, really heavy bales of hay and throwing them to the hungry cows. I wanted to have a bale of hay as a prop, but I couldn't find one. They had to do everything. And maybe, because all three girls were equal participants in the economy of the farm, equal members of the family, equally valued, my grandparents always invested in them. And my grandparents not only encouraged each of those girls to go to college, to go to university, they expected it. And sure enough, all three girls did, which I can tell you was quite rare in the 1950s in rural Kansas. Now, when my mother left home, left the farm to go out into that scary world, and I love this. Her gift, her present from my grandparents was a really big, fancy toolbox. That is what was going to get her through life. So I think the lesson, again, very simple but powerful, that gender stereotypes, these roles, boys, girls, this is just a social contract. that construct, rather, that when you want it to disappear, it will disappear. You just have to make it happen. Now, I'd like to speak a little bit about gender equality. What is it? What is it not? At least in my view, in sort of simple terms. First of all, what is it? I mean, of course, fundamentally at the core, it's about rights. It's about universal, inalienable rights that every girl and boy is born with by virtue of being human. Human rights, civil rights, political, economic, social rights. This is very clear. And I want to talk about a little bit more another side of gender equality. It's about prosperity. It's about the path to the best possible life for all of us. Now, I'm an economist by education, not by profession. I figured the world doesn't really need another economist, so I took a different direction. But I still like to call back on that training to explain things, especially emotional, social issues. I like to help explain them through the unemotional facts of numbers. So I'd like to just bring one concept to your attention. Probably many of you recognize what this is. This is a simple aggregate production function, a Cobb-Douglas production function for those of you in the know. It's very basic. Probably you can't even see it from the back, but you know, Y, the output, this is the result of our endeavor. If it's the macroeconomy, then that's going to be GDP. If it's a firm producing widgets, then that's the number of widgets that you're making. If it's a government producing policy, that's the quality of the policy that you're making. Now, the Y, of course, is a result of the inputs, the factor inputs. So you've got a K there. This is for capital. Again, it can be investment, machines, infrastructure. The L is labor, the human capital. Now, I'd like for you to imagine a very simple concept, basic concept, and this is marginal product. So if you have too much of one of those inputs, if you're out of balance, if you have too much labor investment, let's say, then the marginal product, the value of each unit is low, and the value of the other inputs are high. So imagine for a second, now let's look at that L, human capital. Let's imagine that human capital is comprised of two fundamental different forms, women and men. So if you have too many men in that production function, again, an economy, a firm, a government, then actually the value, the marginal product, the value of each man in that function is low, and the value of each woman is high. So the whole point of gender equality is striving to get to the balance where the marginal product equates. This is that space where we get the maximum output, Y, and the greatest possible prosperity in society. Now, there's good news in this story. I see some concerned looks on the men and boys in the room. There's good news here. That good news is the closer we get to gender equality, guess what happens to your marginal product? Guess what happens to the value of your contribution in that production function? It goes up. You become more valuable too. It's a classic win-win. And I think we've seen, for example, in this global pandemic we're facing now, COVID-19, a very real consequence. We've seen that some of the best, most effective responses to COVID-19 have come in countries where women are at the lead. Not exclusively, but it just shows that that balance is what we need. This is gender equality, in my view. Now, the United Nations, of course, we've recognized this for quite some time. And so we've been supporting the world in preparing a roadmap to the future, Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals. And in fact, there is an entire SDG, number 5, dedicated to gender equality. Again, very much on the right side, but also embracing the fact that getting to that gender equality is probably the single most powerful multiplier across all of the other goals that we have before us. And that's why we prioritize gender equality. Now, I would like to speak a little bit about the challenges that remain. There are so many in every country. Armenia is no exception. Women face significant wage gaps, paid much less for the same work. Participation rates are too low in the economy and governance. We see that gender-based violence continues to assault not only rights, but also to be a barrier to advancement in communities. Many, many challenges. But I am pleased to say that this year we are launching the Generation Equality Forum. It's a global gathering under UN Women that will bring together 80 countries of the world to share practical experiences, how to break through these challenges. And the Armenian government is taking a leadership position, specifically in the Action Coalition for Technology and Innovation for Gender Equality. So I think we can be very proud of that. And of course, this links to the fact that the tech sector is actually a shining light here in Armenia. Armenia is one of the emerging stars in the tech world, emerging hubs for technology. So many amazing, cool organizations, startups, have been talked about already today. And another amazing fact is that women participate in the technology sector in Armenia at a rate much, much higher than the global average. This is something really to be proud of. Unfortunately, it's still only around 30%, so it needs to go up. But it's a great momentum to take hold of. So we in the UN, we're doing a number of things, and it breaks my heart we have so little time. I wanted to dive deep in a number of examples, many, many other examples. I'm just going to dive, though, for lack of time, a little bit more deeply into one. But first, before I do that, I want to have us just a little quick thought experiment. Maybe close your eyes for a moment and think of a peacekeeper. I want you to think of a UN peacekeeper, you know, a brave soldier, often some far-flung corner of the world, probably uniform, this sort of thing, putting their life on the line for peace. And now I want you to think of an Armenian peacekeeper. You can peek. I'll give you a little bit of a hint there. Again, serving in the name of peace in dangerous places, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Kosovo with NATO, whether it's with the UN in Lebanon. Okay, so you've got this person in mind, right? Okay, let's have a look at a few real examples of Armenian peacekeepers. Is she who you had in mind? Raise your hands. Let me see. Did you imagine a woman when you were thinking of a peacekeeper? Anybody? One hand in the back. She's with the UN, so that's cheating. Anyone else? Not too many. What about them? Are these women who you had in mind? These women doing all of the heavy military exercises that you have to do to be a fit peacekeeper? Well, probably not, from the show of hands. I'm guessing most people didn't imagine women. And for this very reason, this very fact, the UN has an entire Security Council Resolution 1325 dedicated to the fact that we have a dearth of women engaged in peace and security. And in fact, evidence is very clear. We've done a lot of research, over 80 different peace agreements in the world, that where you have women engaged in negotiating the peace at the peace table, where you have women engaged in keeping the peace, that the results are significantly better. Peace agreements are longer lasting, they're deeper, they're more transformational. So for this reason, here in Armenia, the UN has been working with the government to implement the National Action Plan for 1325. And in particular, UNFPA has been working with the Ministry of Defense for 4 years to help integrate women into the peacekeeping forces. And those women have served, and to this day serve in places like Afghanistan, Kosovo, and Lebanon. I've had the opportunity personally to speak with many of the women, and I have to tell you, it's so amazing. I asked them, how did you end up here? We heard about all of these gender stereotypes. How did you end up here? And to a woman, the answer is more or less the same. They wanted to be patriotic. They wanted to be able to give to their country in a way that hadn't been available before. And they were compelled by the peace mission. And not a single one of them had any role model. Every single woman was the very first in her family to join the armed forces and to engage in peacekeeping work of any sort. One, in fact, Mary, has said that she hopes that she can be an example to other women. In fact, specifically in her words, she hopes they can look at her and say, let's throw away these ideas, these concepts, that a woman should just strive to be a really good cook, a really good mother, a really good wife. Sure, women can be those things if they want, absolutely. But they can also be whatever they want to do, no matter how difficult the challenge may seem. This was the point. Now, final thought. All of this, these social constructs, these biases, they start very early. And in fact, we know that gender stereotypes are really being formed between the ages of 5 and 7. So it happens early on and it gets cemented in the classroom. There's a really powerful social experiment that I love, and there's a fantastic video on YouTube in a very powerful way communicate how school children are already being indoctrinated and how they react when they're given the opportunity. So a classroom in the UK a few years ago, the teacher asked the kids, let's imagine some occupations. What do you want to be when you grow up, right? And so she chose those occupations that we most associate with being modern-day heroes. Let's talk about firefighters. Let's talk about surgeons. Let's talk about jet fighter pilots. And she asked all of the children to draw pictures. What do they look like to you? A little bit as I was asking you to imagine a peacekeeper. The kids draw the pictures. They're all very excited. 66 different pictures are drawn, almost exclusively men. Then the teacher says, kids, who would like to actually meet real-life surgeon, firefighter, and jet fighter pilot? Of course, the kids are excited. And I would like to just share with you that moment of truth and the power of this moment when the children meet the heroes.
Okay, now who would like to meet these people for real? Yeah!
Babe, they're dressed up.
My name's Tamzin and I'm a surgeon in the NHS.
My name's Lauren and I'm a pilot in the Royal Air Force.
My name's Lucy. I'm a firefighter in the London Fire Brigade.
Now, I encourage you to go look at the full clip, inspirethefutures.org. It's really fantastic. But I want to just focus here on those faces. Look at those faces. Look at the boy. He is confused. He never imagined when they were drawing these pictures that they could be talking about women. He's very confused. But more importantly, because I want to focus on the positive, look at the girl. Look at her face. She is transformed. She is amazed because she also didn't imagine they could be talking about women. And you see at this very moment, a whole new future has just opened for her. Maybe she'll become a surgeon, a firefighter, a jet fighter pilot. Maybe not. That's not the point. The point is, from this moment, she knows it's possible. And that's why it's so important to break through stereotypes and bias. My final thought to share with you, I've been asked in the last couple of days, why are you speaking about gender equality and women's empowerment and such? I mean, you're a guy. Shouldn't a woman be speaking about that? And the point is, yes, of course. And that's why we've had fantastic, amazing women speaking about it today. Not that I can say anything better. It's not that I should say anything in place of. But the point is that I need to say it too. We all, every man, every boy in this room needs to say it too. Because it requires strong women breaking through barriers, but it also requires strong men helping to bring those barriers down. This is the thought I want to leave everybody with, and again, to know that at the end, go back to that production function and recognize that we will all be better off. So join me in choosing to challenge. Let's make those stereotypes disappear. Shnakaltsun.